Good morning, YouTube. This is Tula. Today I want to show you a way of practicing brush strokes that I think is a lot of fun, and that is creating butterflies. I've made lots of them on any paper I could get my hands on with different brushes, and I'll try to break it down in a way that is as easy to understand as possible. I'll talk first about the basic brush strokes, and then I'll share what I found out about the rest of what could affect your butterflies. Okay, I'll start with let me get paper. It's used, but it doesn't matter. So to create the butterflies, what I'm trying to do is use as much of the length of the brush head as I can. I'll zoom in. Alright, so you can try different brushes that you have with this. What we are going to try to do is utilize as much of the length of the brush head as we can. So let me give you an example, and I hope this beautiful yellow shows up well on camera. So usually we have, of course, an infinite number of strokes we can make, but usually we either use the tip of the brush, the width of the brush, and sometimes some of the length, so maybe half, maybe 2/3. And what I would like to do is use as much of the brush head length as I can. I got a wider one here, and as I was practicing my brush strokes and found that I can make this really wide shape, I wanted to practice creating the mirror shape. So I was more comfortable making this one, and I wanted to create this one. And as I was practicing, I wanted to try the baby version of each of them, so smaller one. And when I placed them diagonally, got this really sweet butterfly shape. And this is what we'll try to do today. So I'll get a larger brush to show you exactly to talk you through my movement, because the smaller the brush, the harder it is to make it slowly. As slow enough for me to explain anyway. Let's get this color. Just getting some red here. Okay, so this is a very long brush. The brush head is especially long, and it's easier for me to create very wide strokes with it. So I'll use this one to talk you through it. Now when I'm holding the brush, I'm trying to hold my hand as parallel to the paper as I can. So having the brush be more horizontal helps me use more of its length. Zoom in again. Okay, we are back in, we are zoomed in again. Okay, so I'll start with this way. What I'm doing is initially I'm pressing just the tip of the brush, then I'm starting to drag the brush on the paper sideways, and while I do that I start pressing more and more of the brush until I get a very wide area, and then I'm starting to change direction and to lift. So let's do it. Sorry. Okay, I'm pressing what I want to get is simple leaf shape or a bow shape, and if I can, I want it to have these nice little tips, so somewhat of an S to it. And you can do, well, you can do anything really. First of all, this is practice, and secondly, the butterflies come out nice pretty much no matter what you do to them. Okay, so I'm touching the tip of the brush, starting to press while dragging, and I'm pressing as much as I can, and I'm starting to lift and to move it towards me. And let's do the other one. I think they're not going to be similar. I'm trying to assess how far away I should get, so I should go to start my stroke so that I have just a bit of space for the body, but you'll get it in a few butterflies. Pressing the tip, starting to press the body. Now I've got the whole length pressed down. I'm dragging sideways and towards me, and I'm starting to lift. And now the baby version, pressing about halfway of the brush, dragging sideways and lifting, and the other side, pressing, dragging and lifting. Let me get some excess paint off my brush. And what I've done here is I'm pressing about 2/3 of the brush for the body, but this will give me a background. We'll get to that later if you stick with it. Stick with me. I've been trying to record this tutorial for the past 2 weeks. I have, I think, tens of recordings on my computer, and they were not right for different reasons. Either background noise or my explanations weren't right. So I really want to get this out to you. I'm starting to feel pressure, and I'm trying not to, so that I can be in a nice, playful mindset that will be conveyed to you through the video. Okay, let's change color and try another one. Now let me show you. I get one color on the body of the brush, and on the tip I like getting a thicker paint. It could be the same color or another, so that I'll get color variation in my butterfly. That makes them really nice in my opinion. Okay, another one. I'm pressing the tip, I'm dragging while pressing the whole body, and I'm starting to lift. Getting more paint, pressing the tip, starting to drag and lifting slowly. And the baby shape, about third or half the brush, touching the paper, dragging and lifting. Getting rid of the excess and pressing the brush with the tip towards me to get the body. We'll talk about paper later. Let's try another one with a different brush. Sorry about that. I hope you can't hear my neighbors outside. With the lockdown, everybody's around and it gets quite noisy. Alright, so I was starting to tell you about daggers. Dagger brushes are actually wonderful for this practice, for this exercise. Because of the way they are cut, it's quite easy to use as much of the length as possible. This brush is a really soft brush, and I wasn't quite sure what to do with it, and it's just perfect for creating butterflies. Let's get some paint on the brush. What shall we do now? I'm getting watery paint for the body and a bit of thicker paint for the tip. And with this one, I'm starting again, it's the same idea. So I'm pressing the tip, touching the tip, starting to drag while pressing more of the brush. I get the whole length now, and I'm starting to curl it and to lift. This came out very round. Getting more paint, although I don't think I need as much. And I'll do the other wing. Touching the tip, starting to drag. I'm pressing the whole length now, curling and lifting. And now for me, these are the two strokes I have more trouble with. Trying to touch just about half of the brush length on the paper while dragging. And here we are, another butterfly. Getting more paint on my brush. Maybe I'll move so I have more room for it. Touching the tip, starting to press while moving. Now I'm pressing and I've got the whole length touching the page. And I'm starting to curl and to lift. Let me do one without talking you through it. Maybe it will come out more naturally. And the slower I am, and more deliberate and focused, usually my shapes come out better. Here's another one. This part of the tutorial was about the strokes to create the butterflies, and you saw that you can create them with different brushes that you may have. Try to use brushes that have a longer head. Now, as I was practicing these, I was noticing a few things that I think could be informative and helpful to you, but I'm also afraid that it might be too much information and a little confusing. So you are welcome to stop the video now and go practice your strokes, or if you want to stay on, you can hear what I have found. So with watercolors, we have 4 components that we have to pay attention to, and that's true for any watercolor painting you make, and that is the brush, the paper, the paint, and the water. 4 ingredients, and for our purpose we can combine the paint and water to one and regard it as 3. So we have the brush, the paper, and the paint consistency. And any difference to any of these ingredients will give you different results. So if we use the same brush on the same paper but with a different paint consistency, we will get a different result. If we use the same brush with the same paint consistency but on a different paper, again the results will be different. And same for using the same paint consistency on the same paper but using a different brush, again the results will be different. So I'll try to break it down and talk about each of them, but they all work in combination with each other, and so it's not easy to just separate them and focus on one each time. I think the easiest here let's start with the paint consistency. So paint consistency, I'll use the reds again, they're here in the corner. So I try to use, I'll go back to the round, the small round. I try to use a little more liquid consistency for the body of the brush. You can see that I'm dipping it all around. And then to get a line like here, a slightly different shade, I want to use a slightly thicker paint. And that is because I think if I have paint that is in the same consistency or even more watery, it will run through the brush and they will mix on the brush and not on the paper. Which they did. Oh, but it's such a sweet little butterfly. I'll try again. You see my colors, right? One shade. Second shade. Of course. Okay. One shade. Come on. Second shade. Oh yeah, here we are. Yes. It's a little too thick, but you get my point. Try another color variation maybe. I've got it here. Okay, so this is the paint. Oh, sorry. This is the paint for the body of the brush, and I'll just touch it on the purple, and let's see what we get now. Okay, it's nice. So this is paint consistency, but the amount of paint I get on my brush could vary according to what brush I'm using, and it mostly will have to do with stiffer brush or a softer brush. I have a few number 4s. This is a soft brush, and I also have a stiffer number 4. Let me find it. Oh, here it is. Okay, so I have these two brushes, and you can see the difference in the brush head length. So the Neptune is much shorter than the Aqua Elite. I think I've got them on the same line. And one is stiffer and one is much softer. So let's see. With the stiffer brush, getting paint on it, touching the tip to the thicker paint. Okay, this is good. I need to have quite a lot of paint on the stiffer brush from what I find. Yeah, of course, everybody has their own methods and opinions and preferences. If I'm not loading it with enough paint, my stiffer brushes tend to skip. This can give you really nice effects, but this is what I noticed. With the softer brushes, I need less paint on the body, because if I have as much, it will have too much excess paint. I should focus on the strokes. Let's try to fill it with a lot of paint. And as I told you before, the more I'm concentrating, the better the results I get. So that's to do with the paint and water. Now let's talk about paper. What I'm working on now is cellulose paper, and I'm sure you can see, you see these dark stains that I have, even this large one. Here, this is going to dry as a stain as well. Here, this is where I have, zoom in again. Alright, so maybe now you can see it more clearly. Do you see these stains, the darker spots? This happens when, let me get some more paint. This happens when and now I have too much paint here. when I lift the brush. And the quicker I lift it, the more of a drop I will get, as far as I found. Now when I have a lot of paint, the drop just disperses into the rest of the paint. But really hard to prove my point. Maybe I'll make the mix more watery. Let's see now. See this drop? No, I don't. Okay. Now that I have less paint on my brush, there is no residue to fall. This drop occurs when at just the minute where I lift the brush from the paper. The minute they stop touching, this extra paint falls down into the paper and disperses. Now if I have a lot of paint, this excess just glides into its friends and we can't see it. But if I have less paint, then this drop starts to be noticeable. And this happens with the soft brushes as well as the stiffer ones. Here it is. Let's try a soft brush. Okay, you can see it. Now to not have this happen, what we can do, forgive me, is first of all control the amount of paint we have on the brush. So if I feel that I have too much paint on my brush, I can just touch it on the palette somewhere and it gets rid of some of the excess. Another thing I can do is try to be more slow. So the point where I lift the brush isn't as abrupt. And then I get a slightly smaller drop. And this looks different on different papers. So as I said, this is a cellulose paper. And these drops are very obvious on this paper. I have to check the focus every time I change the zoom. Hold on. Alright, so this is cellulose paper. And we also have cotton paper. Cotton is the nicest paper to work on, especially cold press, the one with the texture. This is the back side of both, but that shouldn't matter for our purposes. And what happens on cold pressed is that what happens on cotton paper is that this paint excess disperses more evenly, especially on the cold press. The hot pressed is somewhere between the cellulose and the cold pressed. So let's try to see it on that. Go back to the soft dagger, and I'm using sheets that I started using in a previous recording that didn't make it. Now you can see the cellulose here. Okay, so let's try. I love this red. Let's start with the coral. You can see it, right? This is really watery. Let's see. Okay. Now let's try it on the hot pressed, this one. And let's try on the cotton, cold pressed cotton. Maybe I should try to create a little wing. Okay. Hope it's in camera. And I think you can already tell the difference. You can already see the puddles drying up. Let's zoom in again. So this is the cellulose paper, and you can see the stains starting to appear. The hot pressed, I see some stains in almost all the shapes, but they're not as obvious. They're slightly more mellow. And on the cold pressed, okay, here we are. On the cold pressed, I do see a bit of these borders, but they are the least of all. And you can see in my previous tests the yellow and you can see in the yellow and the turquoise as well that on some of them we see the stains, and on the cold pressed cotton we see the least of the gradations. And this is actually the reason that I enjoy practicing on the cellulose paper, because the cellulose paper shows me all my mistakes, and then I know that I should maybe have less paint on the brush, on the specific brush, or maybe lift more carefully in that point where I touch. So if you want nicer overall results, maybe try the cotton paper. If you want to see what you're doing and fix it, try the cellulose, or even, I even practiced a little bit on plain printer paper. Wasn't most fun, but it's possible. So that was paint consistency and paper, and you can see how they relate to each other. Brushes, we talked about a little bit, the stiffer brushes needing more paint, and the softer brushes slightly less. We talked about daggers that are really nice for the butterflies. I don't have any flat or angle brushes, but I think they could also give you really nice results. If you try that with them, please let everyone know in the comments how it went. So I hope you enjoyed this practice. I hope you will try it yourselves. I love practicing my brush strokes. I think it's really nice to get to know your brushes and explore what you can do together and try to use it in different ways. maybe you'll discover some nice surprises. Thank you very much for watching and have a wonderful day. Bye bye.